Welcome everybody to the next in the series of Confessions of a Business Owner. These webinars were set out kind of 12, 15 months ago, really to help business owners just get a little bit more clarity and focus with key issues through COVID. And we've had some fantastic conversations. We've had some fantastic speakers on, and today is no different. When you're running a business, it really is extremely tough. There's nothing tougher out there than running a business, and 95% of small business owners ultimately fail. And from my experience in the years I've been doing this, it's because they're not dialed into purpose. It's because they're not building the right business, something that puts fire in the belly every single day. So these webinars are intended to really dig under the surface with business owners about what puts fire in their belly, what motivates them to serve their community. And if that can just give you a few tips to help you dial your purpose in, then we are doing our job. So this afternoon, we're going to talk about how to make an impact and be memorable. How to make an impact and be memorable from Andre Pacini, Ideas on Stage. Andre, welcome.
Gary, thank you very much for inviting me. Again, great to be back.
And let's just jump straight in. This concept of how to make an impact and be memorable, we've all been there, haven't we? We've been sat in the audience, being absolutely bored to death by a presentation, and every slide's got 53 bullet points on. They read them verbatim, and you're literally switching off, but they don't know any different. In a world now where those first few seconds, I reckon the first 8 seconds is your opportunity to make a lasting impression. You know, how important are presentations, and where are small business owners and leaders getting presentations wrong? But before we jump into that, just tell us a little bit about what puts fire in your belly. Why are you doing this? Why Ideas on Stage?
Gary, the reason why I do that is because we've been doing it for 11 years now. So we started in 2010, and I understand how hard it is to achieve your objective when presenting. And Gary, I get super frustrated when I see great ideas. It could be a product, a service, let's call them ideas, getting lost, being forgotten, not being accepted, not being remembered, not because of the ideas themselves. Often the ideas are great. It's just because of the way they are presented. And I get even more frustrated when we are talking about ideas that have the power to change the world, to make things better. So that's why, Gary, I love working with, you were talking about purpose before, and I love working with purpose-driven entrepreneurs. So my vision for the next 10 years is to have 1,000 purpose-driven entrepreneurs share the message, make an impact, and be memorable. Because I believe that if you want to make an impact, the best thing you can do is to be an entrepreneur, or let's say a business leader who has a vision that goes beyond just making money. I agree with you, Gary, 100%. And I know that for them, if they can use their voice for good, and we like to help them, then we can all contribute to changing the world for the better. So that's why we do what we do at Ideas on Stage.
So this, you know, how much does it get under your skin when you sat on the receiving end of a presentation that is just meh? You know, it's being delivered badly, the slides are badly put together. It just turns you off, doesn't it? You know, what emotion is that?
No, and that's the thing. Like, in the end, you can have the best idea in the world, the best product or service in the world, but if you can't communicate it, if you can't present it effectively, it doesn't matter. I think about it. If your sales presentation fails to make customers want to buy from you, then your revenues will suffer. If your leadership presentation fails to inspire your team or your employees, your partners, then they won't be motivated to follow you and deliver on your strategy. If your investor pitch fails to convince investors that they should support your idea, if that's what you need in order to kick it off, it's going to be hard. So when we talk about presentations, Gary, it's so much more than just PowerPoint. And again, you can have the greatest idea in the world, But if you can't communicate it, it doesn't matter. And the problem is, you're right, most presentations, particularly in business, suck. So we do have a big problem.
And do you think they actually, when they suck, that they have the negative impact? Because, I'm assuming that somebody stood on stage giving a presentation about their product or service because they want to raise awareness and generate new customers. But actually, by delivering it badly, it turns people off and they don't want to work with you rather than do want to. So does it have the negative effect?
Of course, it has a negative effect. I'll just give you an example. And it's not even the most important thing, but because you talked about slides before, bullet points. Now, we see that every day at schools, conferences, business meetings, even online now. Now, if you present information in a text-based format with lots of text and bullet points, then, and this is demonstrated by research, 3 days after your presentation, your audience will remember no more than 10% of what you told them.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what, we've got people here listening to us. I don't know what the objective is for our listeners today when presenting, but if I think about my clients, it could be maybe you want to sell something, or maybe you want to motivate the audience, you want to inspire them, you want to move them to action. Whatever it is, you will never be able to achieve your objective if they only remember 10% of what you told them. So it's about making it easier for your audience to follow you. Presenting effectively is about making it easier for your audience to follow you, remember what you say, and sometimes, why not, even do something after your presentation.
So it's about being memorable, isn't it? This kind of creating an impact and being memorable is what we want to achieve. So let's dig right in. So, I've presented hundreds, if not thousands of times. I've been on the receiving end. What are the main problems that we have when, it's either the presenter or the presentation? What do you see in here in terms of the main reasons that there's a problem?
Yeah, I see 3 key problems, Gary. One, and by the way, I saw you presenting a few years ago, and you are a great presenter. So
thank you.
So the main problem I see is that we present a confusing message.
Okay.
Often because we know so much about our subject, and we are also so close to it. Sometimes if it's a business, for example, a product, it's like a child, we are also emotionally attached to it. Then we think that what we are communicating and the way we are communicating it, we think that it's simple for the audience to understand. We think that it's a clear message. But I can tell you, often from the audience's perspective, the experience is opposite. It's a confusing message.
Yeah.
And in business communication, it's very simple. If you confuse, you lose. If you confuse your audience, you lose them. And that's the biggest problem. The other problem, as we briefly touched already, is the typical death by PowerPoint. So you don't have to use slides all the time, but when you do, you need to avoid death by PowerPoint. You need to use visual aids that reinforce your message. So we don't want to see too much text and bullet points on the screen. And then the other problem is from a delivery perspective. So of course you have to have a great message, but that's not enough. You also need to be able to deliver the message in a way that's comfortable and convincing. And the problem there, I don't know about your experience being in the audience sometimes, Gary, but I often see this inability to connect, to make a strong connection with the audience, which, by the way, it's even harder today because in most cases, we can only present online. Maybe things are changing a little bit, but online, it's still possible to make a good connection with the audience, but it's harder. So these are the 3 key things to consider, 3 key problems I see. One from a message perspective, one from a visual perspective, and another one from a delivery perspective.
Fantastic. Well, we'll move on to the next question, but just for those watching and listening live, if you just want to put in the comments box, what's your main challenge or your main issue when it comes to presenting? What is it that you're fearful about? What you're uncertain about? What would you want to get out of today's webinar? So just post those in the comments box and we'll pick those up as we come along. What's the main issue, challenge, frustration, concern you have when you're presenting? So this whole aspect of, if you confuse, you lose. You want to create more impact and be memorable. Do you think bad presenters know that they're bad presenters, or do they think they're good presenters?
That's a great question, Gary. I think that a lot of people, I'm not talking about everybody, but yes, a lot of people don't know what a good presentation is really about. And a lot of people think that perhaps they're even great presenters, but then when you really look into it and in detail, when you really understand what it takes in order to prepare, design, and deliver an effective presentation from any perspective, then you quickly realize that often there is something missing.
Okay. Ian, I just want you to, there's a question here, trying to inspire people to invest in customer experience is his challenge. Ian, I'd just be interested to understand, yeah, of course, presenting is going to get people inspired to invest, but is your concern whether your slide deck's right? Is your concern your ability to present powerfully? What's the challenge from a presenting point of view, Ian, that's missing from your perspective? If you can just dig a little bit deeper on that question. So do people know that they are bad presenters and they're just fearful, they're like a rabbit in the headlights, and therefore they want to get it over and done with quickly? Or are they a little bit naive and don't even realize that there's a problem in the first place?
Either they don't realize it, and again, they may think that they're doing things right, or sometimes it's also it could be lack of confidence. We, in one way or another, we all suffer from a little bit of, for example, nerves, or let's say anxiety, and from a public speaking perspective. And there is something very powerful which can be positive or can be perceived positively or negatively when we think about presenting and sharing our ideas in public. When you've got eyes looking at you, again, whether it's online or face to face, if you are not prepared, that can be difficult. So lack of confidence or being comfortable when presenting in front of a room of people can be a big challenge often.
If you remember when we met, it was at the Association of Business Mentors conference in London, and there was a guy on presenting immediately before lunch who was an insolvency practitioner. I don't know if you remember the guy. And I ripped the Mickey out of him a little bit when I came on, but oh my God, the whole audience was asleep, and I'm surprised he wasn't asleep. It was awful, wasn't it?
Yeah, I remember.
No awareness that there was an issue.
I remember that guy as well. And yeah, if you think about what we've discussed so far, if we think about the three key things we really need, if we want to improve our presentation skills, first of all, you need to be able to develop a captivating message, yes, a message that's memorable. Then, if you don't have to, but if you're using slides, you need to use something that reinforces, that amplifies your message. And then, yes, you need to connect with the audience. You need to be able to deliver your message in a way that's comfortable and convincing. And I remember that guy, there was definitely something missing in each of these three key things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it was an insolvency practitioner from memory. So I know we've got an IP online, and it was from your previous company, Ian. But oh my God, it didn't leave a lasting impression for certain. And I came on stage and I told a couple of jokes at his expense, and it got the audience laughing, it got them engaged, and it led in, didn't it?
And Gary, one thing you did in that presentation, I remember, was just you were using some slides. Each slide, I remember, was very simple, maybe just a word or a couple of words, and you had one idea per slide. That's Absolutely. It. Simple. One idea per slide, whereas the guy before, maybe he had 20 ideas on each slide. It's very hard to follow. It's very hard to remember. So often, another big problem, Gary, I see is that we think, again, because we are so close to our world, to our subject, to our message, to our business, we think that everything is important, right? And so we think that we need to communicate everything. But let's put ourselves in the audience's shoes. Often, if everything is important, then nothing is important. We need, as presenters, it's our job to prioritize things. If everything is important, then for the audience, nothing is.
Well, that's a great point here. And Rosemary's picked this up. Rosemary runs a marketing agency, so she doesn't do a lot of presentations herself, but she helps clients produce presentations, and most of them want to put everything about their business in, and they don't consider what the audience actually want to hear. And actually, you know, it's this old adage, nobody really cares about you or your business. They just care about what problem you're solving. So is that an issue where businesses are trying to say too much and therefore confusing and complicating?
This is one of the biggest issues, Gary, one of the biggest problems in, I would say, in communication in general. I specialize in presentations, but from a communication perspective in general, the biggest problem is the so-called curse of knowledge. You can Google, I don't know whether you've heard of it, the curse of knowledge. It's the number one problem in communication. It is our inability to imagine what it means not knowing what we know. It's our inability to put ourselves in the audience's shoes. And by the way, whether we like it or not, we all suffer from it at different levels. It's a bit like if you think about when you were studying, maybe a high school or college, whatever it is, university. Do you remember, I think we all had that professor, that teacher who you could see he or she knew everything about their subject, but they were not able to teach it effectively, to simplify for the students, right? And that's it. That's the problem. It's the curse of knowledge. Often we know so much about a message that we find it difficult to explain it in a way that makes sense for the audience.
Absolutely. And Ian said here, when he's talking about the insolvency practitioner, he says, to be fair, it is a boring subject. Now, insolvency work is a boring subject, but actually stopping people failing and helping people when they're on the verge of failing, it might be boring, but it's critical, isn't it? So telling a story to explain why you should engage in IP earlier in the process to stop yourself getting on the slippery slope might be a story worth telling. So it doesn't have to be boring if you can tell it in a particular way. Anthony's got a question here. Anthony's running a software business, a great software business. He's looking just for something a little bit different to the usual PowerPoint as part of a new software product launch. Any ideas? Great question, by the way.
Yeah, Anthony, maybe this is not the answer you want to hear, but I believe that the best presentation tool is a piece of paper. That's it. You can create and you can deliver a fantastic presentation or a poor presentation, regardless of the tool you use. You can use PowerPoint, you can use Keynote, Canva, Prezi. There are many different presentation tools, but what really matters is your ability to develop that captivating message that we've talked about so far and your ability to deliver it in the most effective way. And that ability has nothing to do with the presentation tool. That's what I think.
Anthony, does that answer your question? Just give us a thumbs up or, yeah, fab. Thank you. Michael's got a question here. So they demonstrate online shipping platform with many features aimed at improving a prospect's shipping experience, but they tend to go on too long. They don't focus on the key messages, or they target the features that the prospect may be more interested in. What can we do to improve? That sounds to me like too much. So what can they do? They're focusing on too many features, unable to get the message across, tend to go on too long. What are they doing wrong?
Michael, one of the best things you can do to be able to deliver a clear message to your audience is to split your presentations into 3 parts. 3 is a magic number. The human mind likes groups of 3. So the simplest and most effective presentation structure is where you've got a hook at the beginning. You need to be able to hook your audience. You need to be able to capture their attention in the first few seconds or minutes. Then you communicate your 3 key messages. Now, again, remember, if everything is important, then nothing is important. And I know it's hard. That's why clients work with us. But I know that sometimes if you are so close to it, it's hard for you to really understand what to include and what to leave out. But you can, maybe either yourself or with your colleagues. If everything is important, then nothing is. So what are the 3 key things your audience really needs to remember? That's it. If you think that they can remember 7 things or 15 things or 1,000 things, that's not how our brain works. So you've got a way to capture your audience's attention. Then you communicate your 3 key messages. And as Gary said before, let's try to go beyond the abstract idea itself. How can you support your messages, your features? What stories can you tell? What analogies can you use? With Ian, we were talking about a boring message. Now, especially if it's very technical, if you use an analogy, which is a comparison between 2 things, that can be very powerful for you to be able to turn what could be seen as boring into something original and enjoyable. So hook, capture your audience's attention, 3 key messages, and then a punchline. Even the conclusion, your call to action, you need to be able to make it very clear to your audience what was your point and why they should care about it. This is called the rule of 3, which again is a very simple principle, but it's one of the most powerful principles in communication. The human mind likes groups of 3. So Michael, if you can structure your communications, your presentations into 3 key sections, again, you're going to make it much easier for your audience to follow you and remember what you say.
Oh, fantastic. I did a presentation online a month ago, and there was 120 freelancers online. And these freelancers are all translators and interpreters. And, you know, I was talking to the chief executive before the presentation just to really get a feel for their challenges. And he says the key challenge is that most of them are trapped and they don't know how to earn more money. And they've convinced themselves that the business that they have is a good business, even though they all want to earn more money. So I started out with saying, in this presentation, I'm going to teach you how to earn an extra £5,000 a month. And it immediately started this conversation in the chat box. Did you mean £5 a year? No, £5 a month. No, you must mean £5,000. And there was all this dialogue with people, and then people go, no, it means £5 a month. And there was all this dialogue because I'd really ruffled a few feathers, because they, you know, most of them were earning nothing like the kind of money that they'd want to be earning. So £5,000 a year to them was a good amount. Then I told them what the main challenges were that's stopping them earning that money. And then at the end, I told them what they need to do to figure out where they're trapped and how they can move on. So I told them what the problem was, why they had a problem, and how to solve that problem. And I think out of 120 people, I got 35 download the diagnosis tool that I offered them literally within 30 minutes. So it's about creating that message and that, you know, creating that little bit of a story that gets a buzz, isn't it?
And Gary, these example that you've just mentioned tells us something else which is really important. You said that before their webinar, their presentation, you had a call with, what was it, the host, right? The
chief
person,
executive, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And that's what great presenters do. And often we forget it. It sounds obvious, but often we forget it. Often the very first thing most people do when they need to give a presentation is they just open up PowerPoint or any other presentation tool. It doesn't make any difference. And they just put together some slides. But what you did there is you started with the audience. You had that conversation because you wanted to understand something about the audience and what they need. And that allowed you to then present a message which resonated with them.
Yeah.
And that's when we work with our clients, for example, we always start with what we call the ABC of preparation: audience, burning needs, and context. ABC. Audience, burning needs, context. So for everybody here, you need to give a presentation. Forget about PowerPoint and forget about your message, forget about your objective. Start with the audience. When you give a presentation, it's their presentation, not yours. So take some time, even if it's just 5 minutes. but take some time to ask yourself some questions about the audience. Who are they? Ask yourself some questions about their burning needs. What do they really need? What do they expect from your presentation? What challenges do they have, as Gary did? How do those challenges relate to your activities, to your message? And then also you want to ask yourself some questions about the context. For example, how much time do you have? Is it a face-to-face presentation? Is it an online presentation? Do you want to show slides? Can you do that? Is there a screen or a projector? All these kind of, let's say, technical or logistical questions, which can be very important as well.
Yeah, I think it's something that I don't even think I was taught it. It's just something that comes natural to me. But, you know, this particular presentation was called The Freelancer's Trap. But he didn't like that. He said trap might just not be a good word because that might kind of rub people up the wrong way. He says, what I suggest you do is replace trap with dilemma. So talk about the freelancer's dilemma. And off the back of that, we've got 120 people sign up. So I was taking the feedback, but I said to him, what are the main challenges that these people have? And he says, they want to earn more money to have a better lifestyle. Now that's music to my ears, but I modified a standard presentation deck with a few words that I knew would appeal to that audience. And it's just a little bit of homework, and then it's got more impact there.
Absolutely.
So I think that's it in terms of questions. So just to summarize it, how do I avoid death by PowerPoint? You know, you've mentioned it a number of times. We've all been there. We've all been there thinking, is the audience engaged? What have I done wrong? How do I get them back on? How do we avoid death by PowerPoint?
Gary, you need to consider that there are 5 key success factors for great presentations. At Ideas on Stage, we have a method when we work with our clients. We call it presentation score, because you want to score with your presentations. And SCORE stands for simple, clear, original, related, going back to what we said now, related to the audience, and enjoyable. SCORE, simple, clear, original, related, and enjoyable. Now, of course, it's a longer journey. It's not something that I'm happy to stay for as long as you want. But the idea is that if somebody wants to improve their presentation skills, they need to be able to present a message which is simple for the audience to understand. They need to be able to develop a clear structure, a clear storyline. As we said before, how do you capture your audience's attention? How do you communicate your key messages? How do you conclude your presentations in a very effective way? It has to be, your presentations have to be related to your audience. And then also, why not, especially in business, they also have to be original and enjoyable. Because if they are not, then going back to what Ian told us before, the risk is that most business presentations remain dry and factual and boring. There is a specialist in the US, his name is Dr. John Medina, and he knows a lot about the brain. And he says that the brain doesn't pay attention to boring things. Never.
Yeah.
The brain never pays attention to boring things. That's why in a business presentation, once you have a simple and clear message which is related to your audience, you need to spice it up. You need to color it in. Gary, you were talking about telling stories before. That's an example. That's how you spice it up. That's how you make it original and enjoyable.
Yeah. Ian's made a great note here. I kind of known Ian for years, but we sit on the same networking group. He says he doesn't do much presenting to audiences, but all the points mentioned today are easily transferable to one-to-one meetings when you're having, you know, just get to know you meetings. Would you agree with that you just can follow the same format in terms of telling a little bit of story and being memorable and engaging?
Yeah, a lot of the principles we are talking about today are fundamental principles of communication. Then we like to specialize in presentations. That's what we do. But it is true that these are fundamental principles of communication. So, of course, they can be applied in many different contexts. It could be a one-to-one meeting. It could be even written communication. It could be an email, many different contexts. Although then it's not always the same thing. Now, for example, if we're talking about a formal presentation to a group of people, versus maybe an informal chat, one-to-one, a discovery call, a sales conversation. Some principles apply just as well, but it's not exactly the same thing.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, is it, like, you know, most people are stood on stage because they want to get a message across about their business. They want to raise awareness. It's the same in a one-to-one. So you're basically doing the same as you are on stage, but in a one-to-one meeting. And, you know, Rosemary, Ian, we sit on the same networking group, and, you know, every other Tuesday morning, you know, you're asked to stand up and do a 1-minute presentation, and some are engaging and some are funny and some are just downright not memorable at all. And so there are things that people can learn through this process. Anthony's asked a great question here, and this is one for me that I think is a no-brainer, but is the concept of a picture paints 1,000 words still relative today? Is it still relative when it comes to presenting?
It is 100%. From a visual perspective, again, we talked about avoiding death by PowerPoint. And Anthony, the best way to do that is to use images. If you think about, like, I'm in London, and if you think about, but I'm sure it's the same in Leeds and where you are, Gary. If you think about, I'm thinking about Piccadilly Circus here in London, you've got billboards. If you think about billboards, they are when they are well designed, they are very visual, big image, maybe just a few words. Why? Well, because they need to capture our attention in just a few seconds. So if we are walking or talking to a friend or driving, they need to capture our attention in just a few seconds. Now, what if we apply the same principle when we design our presentations? Why not? We also want to capture the audience's attention in just a few seconds. For everybody here, consider this as a rule of thumb. We call it the 3-second rule. When you show something on the screen, you use some slides, whether it's face-to-face or online, it doesn't matter. You show something on the screen, it has to be so simple and, Anthony, visual, yes, that your audience should be able to understand the message behind it in no more than 3 seconds. If that happens, then your slides are effective from a design perspective, and therefore from a communication perspective as well. Design and communication are very much connected. If that doesn't happen, so go back to your slides and ask yourself that question. Go back to each individual slide. Does that slide pass the 3-second test, the 3-second rule? If the answer is yes, great. If the answer is no, then most likely, I'm afraid to say this, but your slides are suffering from death by PowerPoint, and with them, your audience is suffering too.
What I find from experience is that those people that are reliant on the words on the presentation as prompts get a little bit like a rabbit in the headlights, and they kind of lose the way a little bit. For me, putting a visual image up not only stops me reading it verbatim, it's a visual. Now, it can be, oh my God, my business is suffering, or it can be, oh my God, my business is amazing. But putting an emotional image up there tells a story. But for me, it's also a prompt as to what I'm going to talk about on that slide, rather than having to read 3, 4, 5 bullet points verbatim.
Yeah. And also, Gary, if you follow the approach, which I've seen you do it very well, what you're doing there is you're using something on the screen, which is not really for you, it's for the audience. It's something that helps you amplify your message, but it never replicates it. Whereas if we have slides with lots of text and bullet points, it's because we are using them for us as presenters. But no, it has to be for the audience.
Yeah, I have one in one of my slides, and it's a picture of a businessman in a suit, shirt and tie, with his trouser legs rolled up, and he's got his feet in the edge of the swimming pool on holiday with his laptop on his knees. And that is, you know, who's working when they're on holiday? That's the question I ask. Who hands up in the audience, who works when they're on holiday?
And then everybody up.
But people can relate to having to, they're doing emails when they're on holiday. They might not physically have a suit on, but you know, it tells a story, and it provokes
100%.
a conversation. It provokes a conversation. So how, you know, if we take all of these things that you've talked about in the last few minutes, how do I how do I go away and look at my presentation, my format, my messages, my images? What do I physically need to do, go away and do right now in order that I can design a presentation and have an ability to deliver with impact and be memorable?
Yeah, if there is something you want right now that everybody can do very quickly, then we have a scorecard that people can. It's an online tool. It takes less than 3 minutes, and people can use that scorecard to very quickly assess their own presentation skills. And all you need to do, and perhaps Gary, I'm going to send you the link. And the idea is that you just answer 24 questions, yes and no, super simple, and you get a score and what that score means to you. And also it highlights opportunities for improvement for you. Yeah. So if there is something very quick that everybody can do, that would be my recommendation. I'll send you the link later.
Fantastic. So that enables people just to analyze where they can improve.
Where they can improve from any perspective. We started today talking about 3 key things, 3 key problems: message, visuals, and delivery. And that scorecard is very much connected to these 3 key areas that we need to consider.
Fantastic. Rosemary's made a great point here, and it's a great point from a marketer, to be fair. But, isn't it about entertaining your audience, regardless of how serious or how boring the subject might be?
Yeah, we can call it entertainment. Of course, it depends on the context. If we are talking about a project update, maybe a financial presentation, I wouldn't say that it's always about entertaining. That could be one of your objectives. It doesn't have to be the only objective, but definitely doesn't matter what your objective is. But there has to be an element of, we can call it entertainment, or we call it originality. It has to be original. Your presentation has to be original, has to be enjoyable. And this is connected, because we're talking about the objective. It's connected, Gary, to another mistake I see so often, which is that most people think that when they give a presentation, what they're doing is they're just sharing some information. They think that that's their objective. But if that's your only objective, then there is no need to give a presentation. I'm not saying that cannot be your objective, but if all you want to do is just share some information, that's fine. But in that case, think about your audience, give them a document, give them a coffee, give them some time so that they can read that document, drink the coffee, and that's it. You answer their questions, you share some ideas. It's much more effective. When we think about presentations, is because you want to achieve something that goes beyond just sharing some information. And Rosemary, entertainment can definitely be part of it.
Sure, absolutely. Andre, some great insight there. Is there anything that we're missing? For those watching live, those watching on replay that want to develop killer presentations and killer skills to present, is there anything that's missing? Anything you've not shared with us that's important?
In more than anything that's missing, perhaps if there is one final thing that I would like everybody here to remember, is that I believe that if you are an entrepreneur, a business owner, a business leader, then until you are a great presenter, I believe that business is hard. Until you are a great presenter, of course I'm biased, but I believe that your only job should be to become one. And what I also believe is that there's never been a better time for us to become better presenters. Why? Because if you look at what's happening with things like automation and artificial intelligence and robots and technology, also the fact that today we can only present online. So today, more than ever, having a good idea isn't good enough. Think about it. If you want to land your dream job or sell products or lead teams or build brands or trigger movements, if you want to do any of these things, then you need to be able to persuade people and inspire them. And this is not something that a robot will be able to do, never. This is not something that now Zoom will do for you. you still need to take responsibility for communicating your ideas in the most effective way. So that's why being able to present effectively is a skill that will become only more important, no less. So if you are interested in these ideas, then keep going. You won't regret it. And I can promise you, your audience will thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'm going to open this out for questions. Who's got any questions for us, please? I'm sure we all want to be better presenters. We all want to look at our presentations. Who's got any questions? Just while we're waiting for any to come through, I watched a 6-minute clip of Steve Jobs. It's a very, very old piece of footage talking about marketing and why marketing gets overcomplicated. And is there in a pair of cargo shorts and a pair of sandals, scruffy, but the message he gets across and the way he delivers it, I think is one of the best presenters I've ever seen. Just the way that it can just command the audience and get a message across very simply.
Gary, I know which clip you are referring to, and I agree with you. He was one of the best, if not the best, business presenter of all time. There is also a book which I can recommend, The Presentation Secrets of Steve Jobs by Carmine Gallo. Very interesting.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah,
perhaps also as we wait for a few questions, if there are any, maybe one of the questions, Gary, I get asked all the time at the moment is, now we've been talking about presentation skills, we've been talking about some key principles to consider. Does that apply to online presentations? Because at the moment we can only present online, or like in most cases it's just about online communication. And the answer is yes, 100%, because again, if we think about it, if you want to share your ideas online, you still want to have a compelling message. You still want to avoid death by PowerPoint, and you still want to be able to deliver in the most effective way. Now, I'm not saying that a face-to-face presentation is exactly the same as an online presentation. There are some differences to consider. We can talk about it if anybody's interested, but the key principles apply just as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, people have had to adapt, haven't they? It doesn't mean what they had, even if it was brilliant, doesn't mean that it's right for an online presentation.
Yeah.
Fantastic. There's not a lot of questions coming forward at all. So you've either answered everybody's questions or everybody's a little bit caught in the headlights. So, this is a fascinating subject for me. And, I guess my baptism of fire when I worked for an engineering business as a young man, and I had to give a presentation on a piece of product. It was an air conditioning business. We'd launched this product. I had to give a presentation to all of these people, and I was told there was going to be kind of 20 people in the room. And I walked out on stage and there was over 200. And at that point, it was either let this completely ruin me, or just grab a hold of it and compose myself. And thankfully I got through it. But from that point, I've always kind of made a point of just trying to make sure my presentation, my preparation, everything is on, because you just never know what's going to happen, do you?
Yeah. Preparation, Gary, that's the most important thing. This is not something that you are either born with or not. It's not like a talent. It can be developed, and it can be developed through proper preparation. One of the main reasons why most presentations suck is not because of talent or lack of talent, it's because of lack of preparation.
Yes.
If we prepare better from a message perspective and from a delivery perspective, which means also rehearsing, for example, very important, then it goes well.
Yeah, so that's the old adage, isn't it? Preparation. It's all about preparation, isn't it?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, there's no questions coming through, so
maybe I see. I don't know if Rosemary has a question or if she wants to say hi or goodbye. I don't know.
No, I think.
Yeah. Hi, Andrea.
Sorry.
Gary, I've been waving at you, but
sorry, you're off my screen, so I missed you.
Oh, sorry. There's another P that I think is very important, and Gary possesses this P in bags, really, and I think without it, that's why a lot of people do tend to fail, and that's passion. And if you don't have passion when you're speaking and delivering your message, then I think, again, people just think, well, there's a lack of something there. And so I think passion is a key word in delivering a presentation.
Rosemary, I'm glad that you brought this up, because I agree with you 100%. Like you will never be able to inspire or motivate anybody if first you are not inspired yourself by whatever it is that you want to communicate, and that comes from passion. So being passionate about your subject is the number one ingredient we need for us to be able to communicate our ideas in an effective way. I agree with you, Rosemary, 100%.
Well, you would, because you're Italian anyway.
Everything's done with passion in Italy. Fantastic. Well, look, if we've got no more questions, we'll leave it there. Andre, that was absolutely fantastic insight. I enjoyed that. I've learned some things that I'll take away and implement for sure. So where's the best place that people can get hold of you? And are you going to give us the details of your quiz that you mentioned?
Yeah, so that's right. And maybe, let me see, and I'll send it to you, but also for our listeners today, that's the link to the scorecard. And then in addition to that, I'm active on LinkedIn. So if you are on LinkedIn, name and surname, Andrea Pacini, you can find me there.
Fantastic. Well, I'll put a link through to that scorecard and to your LinkedIn profile for all those that have joined us today. So thank you. I hope everybody's enjoyed today's webinar and understands really what drives Andre to connect and to support his audience. Did he say 1,000 business owners? Is it 1,000 business owners that you want to support?
1,000 purpose-driven entrepreneurs, yes, by 2030. Yeah.
So it's good to understand what's underneath the bonnet and driving you to do that. And I hope everybody's got a similar purpose or can develop a similar purpose for themselves and their business for sure. So thank you so much for everybody for joining us. If your purpose is dialed in, you've got a stronger likelihood of succeeding in business. And I think that's what these webinars are all about. So thank you again, Andre. Thanks for all those that have joined us live. Thanks for those that are watching on replay. Take care for now. Bye-bye.